Hi, today I'm gonna show you how to make seeded wholemeal sourdough. I start in the morning by adding 4 different kinds of seeds together. Here I'm using sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds and linseeds. Altogether they should add up to 200 grams, and then I'm adding 200 grams of boiling water as well and let that rest during the day. I'm showing you here how I make the bread. I normally make the pre-ferment and soak the seeds in the morning, then make the bread in the late afternoon and evening and let it rest overnight so I can bake it in the morning. But you could also make the pre-ferment and soak the seeds in the evening, then make the bread in the morning, leave it to rest in the fridge during the day and then bake it in the evening. So here I'm adding the water and then I'm just going to cover it and leave it to rest. For the pre-ferment, I'm adding sourdough starter, which I'm making from rye flour and that I just have fed the night before, so you can see it's nice and bubbly and active. So I'm adding that with water and wholemeal flour, which wholemeal flour is the main flour I'm going to be using in this bread, so you kind of start your pre-ferment with it. I'm adding it all together. We'll also cover it and then just put it together with the seeds to the side until the late afternoon or evening when I start making the bread. It's not necessary to knead the pre-ferment at this stage, just make sure everything is combined. This is now the evening, so I'm adding all my flours to my mixer bowl. I start with mostly wholemeal flour, then also add a bit of wholemeal spelt just for the fun of it, and then I also add some white wheat flour, but that's really not much in contrast to the wholemeal flour. It just helps everything to stick together a bit, but you can also just do completely wholemeal if you want to. After combining the flours, I'm going to add all the water needed in this recipe. This is the autolyse stage, which is not the kneading stage yet, so we're just gonna combine flour and water so the flour can start soaking up the water. It might look like a little bit too little water here, but remember how we have quite wet seeds that we're going to add later and also the pre-ferment. So don't worry for now, just try to combine it as good as possible, and if there are still some dry bits, don't worry. This is then going to rest for 30 minutes. After the 30 minutes, we're gonna add all of the ingredients of the bread together. So here I'm adding the salt, then the seeds, and the pre-ferment. You can see how it's spread out during the day and has become nice and bubbly as well. Altogether, this is going to be kneaded for about 6 to 8 minutes in a kitchen machine. You can knead it by hand. I honestly don't prefer it because it's quite a wet dough, so it's going to make a big mess. While it's kneading, if there's something sticking to the side, I always try to scrape it away such that everything is incorporated evenly. The kneading is done now, so I'm gonna do the first fold. I spray water on my hands, my scraper and the bench surface, just so I can handle the dough more easily. At this stage you really don't want to incorporate any flour, so water is the way to go. Just dump the whole dough out on the bench surface. Then you're going to go around the whole of the dough, pull it up and fold it over. This is the folding stage. You're gonna do this around the whole loaf and even maybe a few more times if possible, but try not to rip the dough. This makes the surface on the bottom of the dough really smooth. So put the smooth surface to the top and pop the dough into a bowl with the smooth surface on the top. Then cover it and let it rest for another half an hour to an hour. After this rest, I'm again going to use my water spray to water a bit the top of the dough, the work surface, my hands and the scraper I'm using. Then try to get the dough out such that the smooth surface is on the bench again, so the sticky surface is on the top. Fold the dough in the same manner than you did before. Over the different folds you're gonna make, you can feel how the dough is different. It's gonna become more stretchy and more easy to work with. In the end, again, take the smooth surface to the top and pop it back into the bowl. You're gonna repeat this once more, and I'm gonna show you this as well. This is after another rest of half an hour to an hour. So this is going to be our third and final fold. You have seen before how I've done it, so just enjoy and watch again. After this last fold, the dough is going to go back in the bowl and rest for the last half an hour to an hour. After this final rest, I'm using water again, and I'm going to divide the dough in two pieces because the proofing baskets I have are quite small, so I will have to bake two breads. But if you have one large proofing basket, it will also be okay to just bake one big loaf. After dividing the two pieces, each of them will get a pre-shape, which is basically just doing a fold again. I'm still doing this pre-shape stage with water because I still don't want to incorporate any flour in the loaves. If the dough gets too sticky, just wet your hands again and continue working. You can see I'm tightening up the bowl a bit more this time. You don't necessarily have to do that. Repeat the same for the second part of the dough. You can see me pressing down here a bit, but be really careful and don't press out too much air out of the dough. After the pre-shape, they rest for about 15 minutes. Then it's very important to flour the bannetons very, very well. Otherwise, your dough might stick to the bannetons and that's not gonna be fun. You can also lay them out with a tea towel, but I found that if I just flour them well enough, I don't have any problems. If you don't have these, you can also just use a bowl and lay a tea towel in that, and don't forget to flour this as well. So as you can see in this stage, I now am using flour, but I still wet my hands a bit when working with the dough because I just like it better. Again, take the smooth side of the dough to the bottom and work with the sticky side on the top. The dough is now being folded and rolled up to later in the oven make it grow really nicely. There are several techniques to do this. You can follow mine or look other ones up. I go for a rather simple one because this dough is neither too wet nor too dry. Because I have two different shapes of bannetons, I first start with the round one. So after rolling it all up, I use my bench scraper to tighten it up quite a lot. And then again with the smooth side down, it goes into the banneton. I add some more flour just to be safe. Repeat the same for the second piece of dough. Afterwards, I will put them in the fridge overnight. I leave them uncovered, which makes the top of the dough, which will later be the bottom in the bread, dry out a bit, which makes it easier to handle it later when baking. This is the next morning. I'm taking the bread out of the fridge one at a time, just tease it away from the edges a bit to make it come out easier. Don't knock out any air at this stage. I preheated this pot for an hour in the oven at the highest setting. Then I'm gonna pop the loaf in, shake it a bit so it's even in the pot, and then scoring it with a knife. This will be baked for half an hour at about 230 degrees. And then the lid gets taken off and it's going to be baked about 20 minutes more. So it gets nice and brown. This is now after the first 30 minutes. It is already almost baked, but still needs some color. Between the breads, I again heated the pot a bit empty, so it's really hot and nice and going for the second bread. I'm scoring this again, 30 minutes with the lid on and then 20 minutes without the lid. Normally I would bake this at the highest temperature setting, but my oven gets really hot, so I tend to just bake it at about 230 degrees, but still heat up the oven and the pot at the highest setting. Just listen to this and enjoy.